Brilliant. We're on, I think, Steph. Have a good lunch, Steph. Put your feet up. Have a rest. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll keep the noise down a bit because I know you're all needing a nap. It's about that time when I normally put my feet up and have a drink and a nap. My name's Martin Walker. I've been gardening professionally for 50 years. I know, I only look 25. I feel about 70. My heart says, or my brain says I'm 16 still. You know the feeling. Brain says I'm 16 and I can't get there quick enough. But anyway, that's beside the point. For my sins, every year, my partner and I design and create a stage display for the kitchen garden stage. It's great working with Chef and with Steph Moon. And what we do is we have a unique setup. It's not done anywhere else, to my knowledge, although I understand that a large spring show down in London, which name will remain nameless, is having a show garden which is going to be a kitchen and a garden merged together. I wonder where they got that idea from. Anyway, so yeah, we set this up a few years ago, Steph and I, because we were conscious of the fact that people like cooking. Most people like to do a bit of gardening of some description or other, and the two fit together so well that we felt that it would be a perfect thing to do. So as I say, Steph comes up with some amazing recipes, and they relate to what we actually grow here, although this year's been a little bit of a challenge, not only the weather, but the director of the shows, Nick, every year he gives us a theme, and you'll never guess, but this year's theme was horticulture. I don't know where he got it from. Crazy. And I've never heard of that before in my life, and as I say, 50 years in. So we set as a challenge, my partner and I, to come up with a stage design that reflected that, and it's trying to have something that is obviously good quality, interesting, informative, but it illustrates the link between art and horticulture. So my first thoughts are, okay, you've got to put yourself in the position of somebody who is probably a gardener who likes art, or an artist who likes gardening. So we started by creating some of the stage props. This here, most of you will recognise that as an artist palette. You'd expect to see splodges of paint on here and paintbrushes. But this artist is a gardener. So instead of having paint, he's got plants. And they've got tools instead of paintbrushes. So it's a subtle link with that. So then taking the art theme a bit further, we live my partner and I, Sue, we live on a small hold in Malton, North Yorkshire, next to the River Rye, hamlet, 14 houses, unmade road, no street lights, no gas. I don't know how we live there, in a tent, I think. It's a little farmhouse, converted farmhouse, with the intention of creating a garden. And we've taken some fences down, because there used to be an old horse paddock. So I made some frames out of the fences. We've had a few trees fall down and some that we had to take down, so I made a few easels out of the branches. Can you tell them a Yorkshireman? Going to give notes away. When we've finished with these will keep us warm next autumn. We're going on log burner. Probably not, we'll use them in the garden. So all of the features that you see on here, what you can do with a pair of ladders, don't throw your old ladders out because they're broken. Make a feature of them, fasten it on a wall, on the top or the front. Use it for displaying plants or hanging plants from. You could put it sideways and hang plants on it. If you're looking at old pallets, I saw this on my phone. You know, I'm worse than kids on my phone. But I don't do all the app things. I search for pictures on phone like Facebook, because you get pictures of all sorts. And I saw this came up, and I thought, that's made out of pallets, I can do that. So there's 3 pallets there, and all I've done, where these blocks are on the pallets, it corresponds to a rail, a wooden rail. Just cut through the rail there, and you've got one thin strip. when you've got 9 of those thin strips and you screw them together in a strange and unusual way, fasten it to a wall in your garden. When you've got your barbecue here, you've got your essentials here. You don't have to put flowers on if you need space for another bottle or a glass. But it works really well. And the thing about something like that, it's cheap. Those pallets cost me £6 a pallet, 3 pallets, 18 quid. Cost me a handful of screws, call it 20 quid. My own time, it's free. So 20, 25 quid, and you've got a garden bar. Fasten it to a wall if you've got a small garden, not a lot of space. In winter time, just take it all off, take them inside, and you can leave that outside, give it a bit of wood treatment. Spring comes, literally. When you've finished at Harrogate Show, get yourself home, barbecue lit, beer and drinks on here. You're laughing for the weekend. So things like that are great for creating garden features. And it's just about playing with things. But people who know me, who've listened to me in the past, will know I'm a devil for gadgets and buying things. I'm a glutton, really, because you see things on the internet and on television that tells you about new ways to grow things. And I've gone through all the no-dig gardening. Anybody no-dig garden? Heard of no-dig gardening? I'll explain a little bit, because I heard about it and I thought, well, I'm going to have a go because people will be asking me questions about it. So I started doing a bit of no-dig gardening last year. And strange as it may seem, it works. What you do with no-dig gardening, you need a lot of cardboard. You don't need to dig the soil. You simply lay the cardboard out on your plot. Ideally, it needs to be broken up to some degree. If it's turf, they always say just put your fork in and wiggle it a little bit. Put your cardboard down over the top of the grass or the weeds, if it's just weeds. And then put, initially in the first year, ideally, 6 inches of compost, garden compost, rotted farmyard manure, anything you can buy in bulk bags. Start with a small area and build up. And then you don't dig the plot at all. You plant straight into this mulch at the top. The plant roots down into the soil. And away it goes. Potatoes, you don't need to dig a trench. You just dig a little hole with a bulb planter, put your potato in. And what happens is the potatoes form in that layer, in that compost layer. Just keep an eye on it. If they start coming to the surface, just put a bit more compost over the top. You don't have to dig a trench or ridge it up. So you have to rotate, ideally, with things like cabbages following root crops and so on. But by and large, it's a technique that saves you having to dig the soil. So I'm sort of moving slightly towards that, because I think as I get older, do I really want to dig my garden all the time? The science behind it is supposed to be that the microbes in the soil, if they're not disturbed by digging, they build up a lot quicker and they're better at distributing food and energy to plants. So there is some science behind it. The only downside is if you live in a really clay or a wet area, then it can be a problem. You may be better off cultivating. But those who haven't tried no-dig, what I would suggest you do is do a little patch. I did a patch and I put cauliflowers in and it worked perfectly well. Great way of not having to dig. And then, of course, the latest one I've heard, vertical gardening. Heard of vertical gardening? It's growing things in a small space, but growing things up instead of along. Normally, when we grow things like courgettes or marrows that scramble along the ground, they take up a lot of space in the garden. People say, I don't want to grow them because I've not got enough space to grow my other things and that. So the theory now is that you grow them up on a framework, so put a trellis up, grow them in a trench, dig a trench, put compost in it, manure in it, feed it, and then rather than let them scrabble, you fasten them to the trellis, grow them up. You might have to support the fruit if it's quite heavy, like a marrow, but you can grow them up a vertical screen. The idea, as I say. And then the other one I've heard of, anybody heard of cloud gardening? Now this is a new one to you all. Cloud gardening. I thought, what's cloud gardening? Did a bit of research, digging around. Cloud gardening is if you garden in a high-rise flat and you've got a balcony, because you're up in the clouds. And believe it or not, it's a different climate. because you've got maybe a little bit more wind. Depending on which side of the block, you might have more sun or less sun. It might be wetter or drier. So you've all sorts of things. It's a different type of gardening. So that's cloud gardening. Amazing, isn't it? And there'll be more coming on. I'll tell you some more in September because there'll be some new ones this year without a shadow of a doubt. But I do like picking gadgets up. And these have been around for a while. I'm trying to get environmentally friendly with most of the things we do. So trying not to use a lot of peat-based composts. But don't get me onto that. I'll talk a little bit later about that. But trying to do things that are recyclable or compostable. And I saw one of these in Lidl the other day. Also available in Marks and Spencer's for about twice the price. And it's... anybody seen one of these before? Have you got one? It's a pot maker. I've seen some things in my life and tried some things in my life, and I thought, I've got to try this. Does it work? Well, yeah, it does really. You're given a few bits of paper so to make the pots with. But then I thought, well, all right then, like all things, if it runs out, can you buy these? Well, I suppose you can, but you don't need to. Because you can use newspaper. And the reason there's two sizes of newspaper will become apparent in a minute. So all I did is, before I use all these, measured it out. And I thought, well, they're about the same size. How big are they? Got my old school ruler. Anybody still got the school ruler? Still got your name on it? This isn't mine. It's a good friend's father's ruler. Sadly, he passed away earlier this year, and she sends things on to me because she knows I collect all sorts of things. And I saw this, and I just thought, that reminds me of school, doesn't it? You scribe your name on it. But you also used to... We can't pick that up on the microphone. But did you do that on a desk at school? You put your ruler on like that, flick it, and it made... Why did we do that? Just because we were daft. And that. But a school ruler, why are they not popular now? And I thought, well, it must be because of feet and inches, wouldn't it? You'd think so. But this has actually got centimetres on it. Even in 1960, they had centimetres. Why we ever went away from it, feet and inches, I don't know. And if you went to a posh school, had a little protractor on the back as well, with the angles on. So instead of buying all, it was all on your ruler. And I thought, it's great, why don't we use these more? You can use them for cutting paper, opening envelopes. Instead, you'll have 3 different implements. So I just thought I'd mention that, in case anybody's got a school ruler in a drawer somewhere that's not doing anything. Get it out and get it in your potting shed. It's great for measuring things. So bits of paper. As I say, we'll do it with a bit of newspaper. How does it work? Well, this newspaper is really important. The type of newspaper you get is really important. Why? Because this newspaper is a free paper. So that means the pots are free. Absolutely. There's a theme going on here. So, and the other reason it's a free paper, I get it doubly free because I write an article in this paper. It's the Yorkshire Reporter, and I write the gardening articles. So they send me 2 copies through the post. So all you do is you've got the top part of your pot maker here. This piece of paper, 2 pieces. There's 2 pots there. Let's not get carried away. 1 pot. So what you do is you put the paper on there and you roll it round like that. So it overlaps. Nearly got it right. And this shoulder here is where you start your pot off from there. Then you scrunch the bottom a little bit like that. You get this other implement that's a bit like a donut without a hole in it. And you push that pot maker on there, give it a little squiggle like that. And here, presto. You've got a pot. But not just any pot. It's free. When you fill it with compost and put a seedling in it, you can plant the whole thing in the garden. And away you go. And it's great. And it got me thinking, All right, what's the next problem you're going to have? I might want a bigger pot if I'm growing something like sweet peas. So all I did is I cut a piece of paper a bit bigger. John Noakes would be proud of me, you know, with this. So all it is, it's about an inch bigger than the smaller pieces. So rather than starting at that shoulder, start a little bit further up like that. So you're allowing about just over an inch at the bottom overlap. Roll it up again. Push that in the bottom. Press that on again. Hey presto. You've got a taller pot. It's magic, isn't it? Fantastic. And I just think it's great because even if your seedlings don't germinate, you can sit in a greenhouse and read something. Gives you something to pass the time. So they're a great thing. There are limitations. I could do with one that'll do a pot this big, but I don't know. Probably never happen. So the other thing that we've got to do with these then is fill them with compost. And what sort of compost are we going to use? Well, everybody's telling us we've got to use peat-free compost, and I think we've got to move in that direction without a shadow of a doubt. The problem is we've been so used to using peat-based compost. We need to understand what it is about compost that's important for a plant. And it's the structure, it's how it's put together. You need to know what a plant wants in order to create a compost to grow it in. So in other words, if a plant is from an alpine region, from the mountains, it's in a really free-draining soil. So your compost needs to have lots of aggregate in it, gravel, sand, so that the water runs through it. So when you're creating compost, bear that in mind, what your plant needs. If you're growing things like vegetables and seedling plants, they need a compost that's going to hold moisture. All the plant labels that you buy, it says, put this plant in a well-drained but moisture-retentive soil. What is that? You know, is it well-drained or is it moisture-retentive? Well, it's both, really. The idea is that it allows air through it, but then an element of it holds moisture, and that's what peat used to do, the peat-based compost. So whatever compost you're going to try, you've got to try and find something that holds moisture, but also lets it drain out so it doesn't get stodgy. The things on the market at the moment are things like municipal-based composts, there are wool-based composts, there are coir-based composts, and then there's one that I've been using more recently, Peat's Peat-Free, which is a compost derived from worms. Pete works with a chap who grows worms for the angling industry, for anglers, and the byproduct is what the worms need to grow, and that comes out as like a soil. And Pete makes it into a compost, adds nutrients and a little bit of propellant, and sells it as a compost, and it works pretty well. Like all the others, coir fibre works pretty well, wool-based compost works pretty well, but they're not perfect. They're not as perfect as peat has been developed to be. So what you need to do is what old gardeners used to do, and that's mix it. You need to learn what structure and what it feels like, what a good compost feels like. So when people ask me what sort of peat-free compost, I use them all. I use them all because I find that different composts do different things. A coir fibre compost is great for opening up a compost. Peat's peat-free and some of the municipal composts are quite close, they're quite tight, they're quite heavy. And you'll have found that if you've tried to grow in these composts individually, you'll find they're different to what you're normally used to. So your municipal-based composts tend to be heavy and stay wet. Your coir-based compost, cocoa fibre compost, tend to drain freely, very freely. Same as the wool-based, it's a little bit of an intermediate. So all I do, as I say, is what old gardeners used to do, and mix them together. And I mix it until I feel it's about right. I'm looking for a structure that is fairly open and light, that I feel that the seedlings will enjoy. How do I test it to see whether seedlings will enjoy it? I mix a batch up, I take my shoes and socks off, I stand in the compost, wiggle my toes about, and if it feels all right, then I'm fairly confident that plants will put their delicate little white roots in it and enjoy it. So my argument is if you mix the compost up and you're not prepared to take your shoes and socks off and stand in it, then how do you expect a plant to grow in it if it's awful and wet and dank and nasty? So if you when you open a bag of compost and you say, oh, it doesn't look so clever in here, don't think, I'll just put them in it and see how they do. Think, how can I change that to make it like it should be? So you might have to go out and buy another bag of compost. If it's wet and heavy, looks cold and nasty, go and get yourself some cocoa fibre compost or some composted bark chippings and mix that with it. And suddenly you'll find that what you had as an awful mess is starting to lighten up, starting to feel like a mix in small batches. I'll have a pot, a litre pot, and I'll experiment. I'll put 1 pot full of this, 1 pot full of that in, half a pot full of gravel in, mix in, and feel it. The thing about gardening is, don't ever be if you're in a rush, don't garden. If you're in a rush, just do washing up. There's less to damage, and less problems go wrong with washing up. It's straightforward. In the bowl, wash it, on the side, dry it. Gardening is more technical, it's more complicated. So if you haven't got time, don't do any gardening. Wait until you've got time, because then you can enjoy it as well as get the job right. So getting the compost right is a big thing. So then these sort of things are fine. But when a word of warning with these, you really need a tray to hold them in. And invariably that tray is plastic. Or if you make wooden boxes, you can make wooden boxes out of the slats that come off of your pallets. Make a little wooden seed box, stand them in that. Then it stops them flopping about because they are a bit fragile when they get wet. And then, as I say, you've got them growing. But there are alternatives. There's peat-based composts, peat-based pots, sorry. What are they like? They're okay, but they take a little bit of rotting down. There's cardboard pots. There's bamboo pots made out of bamboo. And they're okay, but they take a while to break down, and the roots can't get out of these. So again, I was searching online, came across a new product that I don't know whether many of you have seen. Anybody seen wool pots? Wool pots, yeah, they're on the market. They're a new innovation. This is wool pots. This is how they arrive. Little roll of pots inside one pot. And I was looking at these. I said to Sue, I'm going to order them. My partner says, I'm going to try them. I'm a gadget person. I've got to try them. So what are they? They're a wool pot. The idea is they're 100% recyclable. They're decomposable. They're made out of waste wool. So the people who make these, they get wool from sheep, which is tuppence a fleece, and then they get someone to make these little pots, which remarkably look like a sock. Which got me thinking, I've got a drawer at home, and I don't know why it is, odd socks. These are posh ones, the bamboo socks. But they're odd socks, so they don't match. And I thought, what is the difference between that and that? Not a lot. So you could go for wool pots, or you could get yourself in the sock drawer and fill that with compost and use that as a pot. I just thought, well, I've not tried these on, but they're a wool pot. They look like a sock, so why not use a sock? So don't throw your old socks away. If they're wool, if they're natural fibre socks, bamboo or wool, they're perfect for pots. You could actually cut the bottom off and use a shorter pot. But why throw them away? And the thing about these are compostable as well. So why not use them? So these are, the only thing I found about these is I have actually put them on as sleeves on pots because they do discolour a little bit when you put compost straight in them. But if you're interested in trying them, have a go. There we are. I'll throw some down the back because the people at the back are thinking, wait, he's not throwing them far enough. There we are. There we are. So have a go and see what you think to them. They're not cheap. They're supposed to be manufacturing them to, excuse me, to be bigger, for bigger plants. But that's wool pots. So as I said, there's always new gadgets coming out all the time. But it's not just about gadgets. It's about learning how to do things. and cope with problems. And often I get asked about taking cuttings, about growing things, and what to do. And it gets me back to basic principles. You need to learn right from the start. And we all, believe it or not, we all learn at school. You probably don't remember. We all learnt at school when we were in the classroom in primary school, and while they were, excuse me, while they were stoking the fire. I'll just see if I can get a drink. Are you there, Debs? I'll just nip and get a drink of water. Won't be a minute. Thank you. Small break. So yeah, when we were at primary school, we all used to do the same thing. The teacher would say, bring a jam jar to school, and I'll give you a piece of blotting paper or kitchen roll, and we put it inside. And what I want you to do is put a broad bean seed down the side, put a 1/4 inch of water in the bottom. And what happens to that seed? Excuse me, starts to grow. Oh, thank you, Andy. Most gracious of you. What that is your first gardening lesson. You learn what a seed does, how it grows, the fact that it produces a root and a shoot. And it's great. That's what started me into gardening. Loved it from that day on. It was great. So, excuse me, that's a lesson that you learn and should stay with you the rest of your life. So I'm going to show you now what to do with seeds that perhaps aren't germinating that well, or that you're having problems with. Often you buy a packet of seeds and you've had it a few years. Excuse me, terrible. You've had it a few years. It says on the back that the date's run out, and you think, is it any good? Don't know. Is it going to germinate again? What should I do? My Yorkshire instinct is always to try it. But first of all, you can do a germination test. Gosh. And to do your own germination test, all you need is a little container like this, and a little bit of kitchen roll, and you put the kitchen roll in the container like that. Put some water in, 1/4 inch of water in there, get that damp. Particularly with things like parsnip seed that don't germinate too well, you don't know whether they're still viable. Sprinkle a few seeds on top of that damp paper, leave it on a windowsill, and in about 7 days' time, you'd expect to see small shoots growing. If you put 20 seeds on there, and 3 or 4 of the seeds germinate, then you just sow the seed a bit thicker. If none of it germinates, throw the packet away. You've not wasted sowing it in the garden and thinking, is this going to come up or not? So that's a really easy way to test any old packet of seed that you've got. And I do it quite regularly, and particularly with some plants like parsnips, where even fresh seed, you can put it in the ground and it doesn't germinate that quickly. It's slow as parsnip. So what you do, 2 things with parsnip to guarantee it. You do a germination test. So you damp a piece of kitchen roll, put your seed on top, and when those little seedlings start to have a little shoot on, you can actually plant them either in a pot or plant them out in the garden. They can go straight out from this piece of paper into the garden. So you know that your seed packet is germinating well. And then what to do with the rest of the packet, pull your drill out, sprinkle your seed along the drill, but as long as really thinly spreading your parsnip out, you sprinkle a few radish seeds on it as well in the same drill before you fill it in. Just sprinkle a few radish seeds in before you cover it over with soil and pat it down, water it. Radishes germinate in about 7 days, so they'll mark the row for you, so you know where your parsnips are. So I'm like you, I've sown parsnips and thought, now was it there or was it there? I'm not sure. And you end up digging, and the law of averages, if you wanted to find a parsnip seedling on an allotment, you'd never find it. If you want to miss a row of parsnip seedlings, you'll hit it every time. It's the law. That's what happens. Life plays these tricks on you. So that's a great way of doing it. But germination testing is really good. Some of the other tips I've picked up is making mini greenhouses. I need your imagination now, because that's a pot with a few seeds in. Or maybe a few cuttings that you've taken. So when you take a cutting, you look at all the gardening books. It says, take yourself a plastic bag, put a plastic bag over the top with a clip on it, keeps it nice and moist in there, doesn't it? What happens with that then? If it's on your windowsill, it's all wet on your windowsill. You know, I'm just a simple gardener, but I thought, if you do that, put it inside, zip the top up, perfect. It's got its own little greenhouse. It stands down. You can check it on the morning. Hello, you all right? Looking all right? Zip it back up. If it's a hot day, move it to somewhere shady out of the direct sun. Open the top up, let a bit of air in, spray a bit of water in, close it up at night, bring it inside the curtains. Cuttings or seeds with their own transportable greenhouse. And it's one of those things you would never think about it until someone explains the logic behind it. So invest in a few of these zip bags, or when you've had your sandwich, as long as there's no residue, use them as mini greenhouses. Excuse me. So they work really, really well like that. The other thing about it is, strangely enough, I learned this tip from a builder. He said, do you like a cup of tea in garden? I says, yeah, I love a cup of tea in garden. Walk around. My first job every day, kettle on, get a brew going, then go out in garden. Never rush into things. Never go out in the garden without a brew. Because that's, the brew, tea is a marvellous thing. What it does, it helps you see the things that need doing urgently in a garden. It's amazing that, isn't it? So all you do is you walk around with your brew. Oh, hang on, some weeds there, need to get back to them. Oh, grass needs cutting. So while you're walking back and drinking your tea, you think, I need to go get the petrol for the mower or the electric cable. What else do I need? Oh, I need my bucket for taking them weeds out eventually. Maybe get edging shears as well. If you'd have set off, you'd have missed all of that. You'd have been in a mad rush. You'd have got to the shed and you think, I've forgotten my petrol. I don't know where my mower is. Always have a brew. Makes things work a lot better in the long run. So the other thing I tend to do is buy things. You know, I'm a gadget collector. And I saw these the other day. When you're tying plants up, what do you use to tie your plants up? Bit of string, a bit of raffia, sweet pea rings. Well, I bumped into these plant clips. I think they were about, I don't know, they're only about £1. They've got a little spring on them, a little plastic clip. There we are, you can try one of those. Anybody want to try one of those? Look at that. That's the, I ought to have a health and safety test, can't I, really? So, there we are, one more there. So, yeah, they come in different sizes, little plastic clips. Do they work? Well, I guess they will do. Is it just a gadget? Well, yeah, it's a gadget. Will a piece of string do? Absolutely. Will a sweet pea ring do? Absolutely. Anybody know what sweet pea rings are? They're like a little bent piece of wire. Get them in a pack of 100. They're a few quid. Or you can make them yourself. How do you make sweet pea rings yourself? You get soft tying wire. Buy it from a garden centre. Galvanised or plastic coated wire. Get a broom handle or a kitchen curtain pole. And you need a section about this long. Make sure you don't need the pole again. So cut yourself a section that big. Get your wire, wind it round like you're making a spring till you get so far on. slide it off at the end, get your tin snips cut up, thousands of sweet pea rings. Doesn't matter if you lose them or throw them away, or even if they go rusty. You can always make some more. So from a £1 roll of wire, you'll make 1,000 rings. If you buy a pack of 200, it'll cost you about £2.50. No contest, is it? So that's about me, more or less done. I'm going to take questions now. If anybody wants to ask me any questions about the plants or about an issue you've got, a gardening issue, about a question you've got about this rather wacky stand, or anything else for that matter that you're struggling with at home. Anybody got any questions? Gosh, look at that, expert gardeners. I've got a question. Has anybody bought any plants? What have you bought? Sweet peas. Plants. Sweet corn. Are they seeds, sweet corn, or plants? Plants. Is it a particular type of sweet corn? Anybody else grow sweet corn? How do you grow it? All right, yeah. All right, F1s. F1 hybrids. Anybody else grow F1 hybrid seed? You all look on the packet, you think, I'll grow F1 hybrid, because what it says on the packet is, this is seed that's guaranteed. It's genetically, well, it's crossed to produce a hybrid, a plant that will guarantee results. And they're generally created for the production industry. So for large market gardens and farmers, cauliflowers, cabbages, most of the vegetables we grow are from F1 hybrid stock. Why? It means that when a farmer wants to lift his cauliflowers, he can lift them all at the same time. So you sow them, they grow at the same rate, they mature on the same day. Now I like cauliflower, but I couldn't eat 50 on one day. So my advice is only buy F1 hybrid seed. A, if you can share them with other people, and B, if you want all your cauliflowers to be ready at the same time. So buying an open pollinator, something like all year round, what that will give you, that'll give you a range of cauliflowers of different sizes. So in other words, if you find yourself home alone, you can have an individual cauliflower, or if the family's coming, you can have a big one. They'll be ready at different times, so you don't have to have cauliflower every night. And they're easier to propagate and generally cheaper too. F1 hybrid seeds are expensive because they have to be bred. And as I say, they're designed so that a supermarket will give you consistently sized cauliflowers. And it's the same with all F1 hybrids. And if you go for non-hybrid plants, there'll be a mixture of sizes and shapes, and they're ready at different times. So bear that in mind when you're buying your seed and your plants. I've just tried sweet corn this year that I'm growing called Gem. It's called, I think it's called coloured gem or gemstones. And it's lots of different coloured sweet corn on a cob. And I thought that'll be great for the barbecue. And then I found out it's not a sweet corn that you eat off the cob. It's what's called a cornmeal cob. In America, they grow two types of sweet corn. One type of sweet corn is for eating off the cob, and the other is for milling and creating corn flour. They produce corn flour. And a lot of these ornamental corns are that. You can use them for popcorn, and you can use them for making corn flour, but you can't eat them off the cob and do them on the barbecue. So always bear that in mind. It's always as well checking when you're buying something that it is what you think it is. When someone says, I'm selling you sweet corn, it may sound daft, but is it edible sweet corn or is it for popcorn or cornmeal? Right, I think we're more or less done, unless anybody has any final questions. As I say, by all means, if you're shy, come up afterwards and ask me a question. Otherwise, have a great show.